Coming up on Need to Know, everyone from Whoopi Goldberg to Samuel L. Jackson have sought to find the answer to one question: where am I from? But tracing DNA to find family roots has also resulted in significant discoveries. The connection between genetics, ancestry, and health just ahead. Also on the show, why TV stars are traveling to Rochester to set the stage for a community conversation about veterans, their families, and post-combat wounds. The theater of war later on the show. And it's the war some refer to as an unfinished history, preserving stories of the Vietnam War to better understand its impact. That just before a special 10-part, 18-hour series on PBS. Stay with us. Need to Know starts right now. It began as a journey to self-discovery, but it's a quest that hasn't quite come to an end. An international leader on race and genetics and health disparities, Rick Kittles, would likely say that's a good thing. And so would the more than 150,000 people that have utilized the company he co-founded, African Ancestry, to help connect the DNA dots to their family tree. But the discoveries don't stop there. The RIT alum and director of the Division of Population Genetics at the University of Arizona is in Rochester. He's the keynote for the 2017 Patients First Awards Luncheon for Jordan Health Foundation. Before that keynote, Rick Kittles joins us in the studio to talk genetics, ancestry, and how it all connects to health. And Rick Kittles, welcome. It is an honor to have you here.
Thank you.
So I understand, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, that you had an interest at a very young age in biology and math, and you used to look around your classroom and you would look at the different shades of skin color and the different hair textures, and you would wonder, why, how does something like this happen? So talk to me a little bit about how that curiosity ultimately led you to becoming this world-renowned geneticist. And I understand it's a personal story connected to that.
Yeah, I just was always interested in variation and diversity. And I would look around rooms and just look in awe and appreciation of just how different folks looked. And I knew that there had to be some genetic component. You know, we inherit these traits from our parents, where we resemble them in some ways, and we're a mixture of their genetics. And so it always, you know, looking at skin color, body height, body weight, but then also eye color and hair texture, stuff like that. I always was excited about trying to decipher how genetics played a role in the biological diversity of man. And so I would, you know, read a lot about it. And then in school, I took courses that would help me understand it better. And I knew that when you look at, for instance, African Americans, it was such a large set of diversity there in terms of how African Americans look. And we come in all types, right? And so I said, well, Africa must be the root of a lot of this genetic variation. And in fact, it is for humankind. In fact, modern humans started in Africa, and that's where the root of all of us in terms of our genetics arises from.
I want to point this out. You co-founded in 2003 African Ancestry. It has been described as an international leader in helping trace maternal and paternal lineages of African descent. So the database that you have, you've collected over 30,000 indigenous African samples that you began to collect quite some time ago. So talk to me a little bit about what makes African Ancestry so different from others that exist, such as Ancestry.com.
So I started my career as a genetic epidemiologist when I was at Howard University back in '99, 2000. And one of the things that I noticed is I was trying to understand genetics of cancer in African Americans, in particular prostate cancer. I noticed that our databases and our understanding of genetic variation in African descent people was very limited. And so I wanted to know more about it, to try to, collect more data to really understand the context in which we are. We place our genetics into a particular context, a body of variation. And so I said, well, I need to really start collecting data. And I worked with anthropologists and geneticists and historians to try to collect data that was important for the history of African Americans. And a lot of that is centered around West Africa, of course, and the transatlantic slave trade. And so being at Howard University was important because it was one of the biggest medical schools for training doctors from Africa. I mean, you know, students who wanted to become physicians. And so there was a lot of folks from Cameroon and Nigeria, Senegal, who came to get degrees. And so I worked with a lot of them. I sent students to Africa, and I went there myself, and I worked with a lot of historians and archaeologists also. And so we were able to amass this very comprehensive database that allows us to look at African American genetics in the context of present-day African people.
Well, in an interview that you did a few years ago, you said there's now this intersection between science and society, and you said it's caused some conflict to a certain degree, but it's also helped us to reconcile some of the uncomfortable histories from various ethnic groups. So to talk to me a little bit about why, what are some of the opposing views? What are the arguments that you hear in relation to this?
Well, you know, this country was founded on race and racism and segregation, and so we have this history, this really sad component of American history that is uncomfortable for a lot of people to try to deal with. And in fact, that's why I firmly believe that it's going to take a long time before we're able to really let go of this issue of race in the United States. And so when we try to understand sort of family history and ancestry and place it in the context of race really isn't a biological concept. It is more of a social political construct. And so when we overlay genetics and social political race and ancestry, it does create some tensions. For instance, we think about African Americans, we think that all African Americans have a lot of African ancestry. That's not necessarily the case. You know, based on family history, you may have significant European ancestry or Native American ancestry, but still call yourself African American. And so we have to really understand that the genetics and the science and the technology is actually creating ways and opportunities for us to create new identities and new terminologies of how we define ourselves. One of the issues, I think, you know, folks say, oh, well, you're really using this to reify race. No, we're not reifying. And actually, we're deconstructing race. We're saying, look, race is not this genetic entity for humans. In fact, what we're doing is showing that we are all part of this human family in some way, one way or the other.
Well, your varied roles and areas of expertise, immense, by the way, it encompasses race, genetic ancestry, cancer genetics, and also health disparities. And the thing that I think is so fascinating is this intersection or this cross between genetics and ancestry and health. Explain how that works.
Well, you know, we inherit our DNA from our parents. And some of these genetic variations that we inherit actually lead us susceptible or higher risk for particular diseases like cancer. But we also, you know, we don't just inherit genetics, we inherit certain behaviors like diet. So, you know, there's like these old Ghanaian proverbs that the one pot in the family that everybody eats from or whatever, that's a major sort of component in terms of the transition or the transmission of diet. And so diet and lifestyle also is important. So we inherit these things. And so there is what we call a genetic history, there's a disease history and behavioral history, all intertwined to create your risk profile for disease. And so now we're at a point where we can really look at the genes that we inherit and how some of the variation in those genes impact risk for disease. So we're doing that in the context of diet, lifestyle, in really interesting and sophisticated ways now. So this is an exciting time.
So talk to me a little bit about how is that beneficial for those that are dealing with populations dealing with health disparities?
Right. Well, health disparities in particular are, you know, for the most part, social determined, meaning behavior, diet, lifestyle, opportunity, access to health care, compliance with your physician, stuff like that. But then there are some of these diseases that have a strong genetic component. For instance, prostate cancer is one of them. triple negative breast cancer, where there's a strong genetic family history that's contributing to that disparity. But the bulk of disparities, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, really are more so socially determined, and in fact can be, we could create interventions that are more social that would have an impact than just studying the genetics of it. You see what I'm saying? So it's not just an easy sort of answer when we talk about disparities. But one of the things we are looking at is how do we assess someone's baseline risk based on their genetics and family history. And for instance, if your risk is higher for prostate cancer and you're 25, 30 years old, you and your doctor should know that you should be screened more regularly once you get, in your 40s, 45 years old, because you're at an increased risk. So those things could be quite useful for not just physicians, but the patient too, to understand that I have this increased risk now. I need to be screened more aggressively. I need to stay on top of this before it gets too late.
Before we close, I have to say, I understand that a number of celebrities have participated in seeking their roots, and you serve as a DNA expert for Henry Louis Gates' PBS program, assisting in that effort. Can you tell me any interesting celebrity DNA, stories or findings, or how someone may have reacted that to you is just meant something to you? Well,
they vary. I mean, just like the average person on the street, we have so many different narratives. We have so many different stories, and so. I'm excited when I was quite excited, for instance, when Isaiah Washington received his test result. He was, I don't know if you've seen it was on I think it was Good Morning America or something, where
he go to YouTube and get that video
right,
too.
Right, where he got so excited. Yeah. And when he found out he had ancestry from Sierra Leone. But one of the things that I really liked and appreciated was beyond just that level of excitement, he actually went back to Sierra Leone, was able to get dual citizenship, was able to build and help them with building hospitals and homes. And so it was one of those situations where he became an advocate because of that connection that he had with DNA. And that's what I really wanted to see as we started this process.
Well, unfortunately, we have to close for now, but to Rick Kittles, thank you so much for your time. And the good news for you is you can hear more from Rick Kittles. He'll be speaking at the 2017 Patients First Awards Luncheon for the Jordan Health Foundation. That is this Friday, September 15th at 12 p.m. at the Rochester Riverside Convention Center. So get your tickets at jordanhealthfoundation.org, and also be sure to learn more about African Ancestry online. Just go to africanancestry.com. And next week, actors from some of your favorite TV dramas of the past and present will be in Rochester. However, they'll be performing a different type of drama, a live reading of the Greek tragedy Ajax. The ancient play describes the visible and invisible wounds of war. The play is part of an innovative public health project intended to create an open dialogue and understanding about the impact of war on veterans, their families, and communities. Joining me at the desk to discuss in more detail is Marine Corps combat veteran and Vice Chairman of the Board for Veterans Outreach Center, Nick Stefanovich, and Army veteran and Executive Director of Veterans Outreach Center, Laura Stradley. Welcome to both of you, and I appreciate you being here, and congratulations also on the new job.
Well, thank you. We're very excited to be here.
So when individuals make the transition from military life, from serving our country overseas back to civilian life, I understand that these stories definitely would vary based on the individual experiences of those individuals. And I also would have to believe that, as we've heard from stories, that there are unimagined pain and wounds that come along with that. Nick, you have shared your story in front of national audiences, on national television as well. And I want to know, for viewers that are meeting you for the first time, what do you want them to learn about your story, post-combat struggles, and the importance of hearing these stories?
Yeah, so I guess one of the most important things would be to acknowledge that combat impacts everyone. However, not everyone develops a debilitating form of post-traumatic stress. And so all combat veterans have the potential to return to our community and become leaders and to serve our community. However, some need help. They need our society to kind of intervene and remove the obstacles that stand in their way. When I came back in 2006, for 3 years I struggled. And it was a downward spiral for me. And it was through the Veterans Outreach Center and our Veterans Treatment Court and bringing attention to the community, which Theater of War is doing, that I was able to return finally to the community and become a leader and an advocate.
Well, as I mentioned, on September 22nd, the Veterans Outreach Center will be hosting a production of something that has traveled throughout the U.S. and also Europe, and that's Theater of War. And this presentation really incorporates readings of the Greek tragedy, Ajax. And I want to ask you, for people, they may think, Laura, a Greek tragedy. What is it about the importance of this story that really does draw upon a connection to what our combat veterans have experienced, are experiencing today?
Sure. Well, it's really it's amazing actually when you look at the storyline of this play and how similar many of the struggles that the key characters in the play had that are similar to those that our returning veterans experience today. And it just kind of shows that, you know, even over hundreds and hundreds of years, we still have work to do when it comes to learning how to receive our military service members back into the community in a way that enables them to, you know, be, as Nick mentioned, you know, just the most productive and leaders and that type of thing. And again, certainly not everybody experiences those transitional challenges, but for the ones that do, this play really highlights a lot of the work that we at the Veterans Outreach Center do with people who are coming home struggling with maybe some mental health issues, substance abuse, and all those types of things.
Well, as I mentioned, following the Theater of War, there will be a conversation. This is an open dialogue, so members of the community encouraged to attend. And Nick, that you will be on this panel that will be present. And part of this is, it's about the dialogue, it's about sharing stories as you did with us right now. I want to know, what is it and what ways can this really serve as a bridge building type of a project for creating understanding? How does that happen?
It's an amazing process, actually, and the producer behind this is a genius in how he did this. So he created this idea of using theater to help our society come together on issues that we cannot seem to come together on in other ways. And so the actors read the roles, and as soon as the actors are done, he takes them out of the equation. People are not there to meet actors or take pictures. They leave the stage, and a panel takes the stage. And the panel members each give 5 minutes of how they relate to the play, and then once they're done, they're done. And then he turns his back to the panel, he goes out into the audience, and he says, you know, to the 500, 600 people there, discuss it. And I have seen topics range from racism in the military to alcoholism to, I mean, in New York City, somebody stood up and wanted to talk about the most recent transgender ban from the Trump administration. And you get these really political, charged topics that people just fight over, but how somehow he builds an atmosphere where there is no hostility. Everybody's comfortable and they share their ideas. He did something like this when the race riots were going on in Ferguson, Missouri. He brought a play of this nature there, and it was amazing. He has a picture in the beginning of the theater, and on one side is the law enforcement community, and on the other side is the minority population of Ferguson. And then he has a second picture after the event, and it's the stage, and both groups are together and speaking about the issues. And so the reason why I wanted to bring this to Rochester is I've never before seen the civilian community understand combat and what our veterans are going through as well as they did after watching this play.
So I would imagine that Veterans Treatment Court would be one thing that would come up when you're on the panel. Talk a little bit about that, because I am quite certain that we have some viewers and they're tuning in and they're hearing about this for the very first time. Describe what is Veterans Treatment Court and how do former military find themselves walking through the doors?
Yeah, so Veterans Treatment Court is just a really wonderful testament to how our community has come together to support military and the issues that sometimes they have after service. We have had Veterans Treatment Court here in Rochester for, what's it been, Nick, about 10 years?
2008,
yeah,
I
so
believe it was.
Almost 10 years, and we were the second one in New York State to have it. And we have had other treatment courts around the country come and model after ours. And essentially when a veteran gets arrested for, you know, some nonviolent crimes, then they have an opportunity to go through a treatment program that that not only gets them connected to the veteran benefits that they may be eligible for and never knew they were, could be receiving. They get peer mentors, which is a huge component of it, and really gives them that that support that they need from somebody who understands the challenges, the unique challenges that they face. And they go through a year-long program in some cases where they're expected to have sobriety and meaningful employment and all those kinds of things. And at the end of it, if they graduate from the Veterans Treatment Court, they're in such a better position to continue on with the rest of their life, successfully. And the Veterans Outreach Center, we're a very integral part of the Monroe County Veterans Treatment Court, and we are actively involved with all the veterans who come through that program. We've got case managers that facilitate a lot of the work that gets done there, and we have a lot of supportive services within our agency that the veterans who go through treatment court are then afforded, whether that's assistance with budgeting or legal issues, therapy, wellness, supportive housing, all those kinds of things we're able to provide to them through our relationship with the Veterans Treatment Court.
And Nick, you called it a transformative process.
Yeah, I went through the court in 2009, and I'm only alive today because of the court. I spoke at the 9/11 event a couple of days ago, and I spoke about Judge DeMarco. Judge DeMarco is the presiding judge over the Veterans Treatment Court. And Judge DeMarco didn't serve in the military, but in this way, he's serving our community more than many of those who did serve in the military. And there are veterans today who are only alive because of what him and his team have done on on the bench. The court is an amazing process, an alternative to incarceration, and it's, for the last year, I've been working in jails and prisons across the country, and so the population in those jails and prisons, the majority of it are men and women who don't need to be there, who should be out in our community, taxpayers, leaders, contributing to the community, and because of mental health or substance abuse or other issues like that, we have them locked up and they cannot contribute in that way. And this is one of the programs that allows us to get into that population, and instead of saying, how can we throw you away for 10 years, it's how can we help you reintegrate into society.
Well, we have to close for now, but I want a special thank you to my guests, Nick Stefanovich and Laura Stradley, for your time today. Theater of War, it is an event not to miss. So please, Veterans Outreach Center, they are hosting this. This takes place next Friday, September 22nd at 6:30 p.m. in the Callahan Theater at Nazareth College. For more information and to get your tickets, go to boxoffice.naz.edu. And premiering this Sunday on WXXI TV is The Vietnam War. It's a new 10-part, 18-hour documentary series directed by Ken Burns and Lynn Novick. WXXI News launched its own special web series to help shape an understanding of the impact of this war prior to the series premiere. The local stories are all told through the perspectives of Rochester residents directly affected in some capacity by the Vietnam War. Here's a look at one of those individuals, Ginny Nguyen, a local real estate agent and vice president of the Vietnamese community of Rochester, Inc. Take a look.
Well, it was dramatic because I remember, even though I was a young age at the time, but I was enjoying playing games with my cousins. And my father came home and he said, we gotta leave, we gotta pack, we gotta leave now. The country is overrun and the communists gonna be in hours at the time, because I still remember it was April 29, 1975. And my mom didn't believe him, and nobody believed him, because they said, well, how? I mean, we're in war with the communists for so many years. We won. Why are we leaving this time? It probably just, rumors. So, but my dad said, nope, this time is for real. We gotta leave. So we packed everything in within 10, 15 minutes, and we jumped in my father's Jeep. And he has a couple of his soldiers that's work under him, and it's still there at the time. And that's when we get out from Saigon. We escaped with my father boat, and then it's got malfunction. Something wrong with the mechanical, in the boat. So we got drifted in the ocean for a couple of days. And we were so scared that the Covenants would come out and get us. And luckily, there was another boat. They call it boat people, the fishing boat. And because my father's, he had soldier with guns. And so the other side, they needed protection. And we needed a boat that could, as working. So they let us come aboard with their ship. And then we were able to get out from the international water. And then we drifted there for like another 3-4 days before the American ship picked us up. And then we went to Philippine camp for like a couple months. And then from there we go to another camp, Wake Island. And then from there we go to Arkansas. And then we waited for a sponsor to come to Rochester. So it was quite an experience. What I have here, it wouldn't be without all the veterans that came to America and sacrificed their lives. And I feel really bad now that I'm a mother too of a son that is active. I understand how other parents feel. And now I know why, they're against the war. They did not get against the war because of the Vietnamese people or, anything, because they care for their loved one. And I understand that. And I just wanted the, veteran to understand that we, Vietnamese people, and I'm not just saying for my family or myself, that I know most of my friends living here, we really, really deeply appreciative of everything they have done.
For more Vietnam War stories from local perspectives, go to WXXInews.org. And the premiere of The Vietnam War by Ken Burns and Lynn Novick is Sunday, September 17th at 8 p.m. on WXXI TV. And that is it for this edition of Need to Know, WXXI's news magazine. I'm your host, Helene Bianduti-Hofer. Thank you for joining me tonight and throughout the weekend. And thank you for supporting public broadcasting. Have a good night.